Hello, everyone. My name is Pamela Lopez, but please call me Z. I am the director of Green Space Miami, and I want to thank all of you personally for joining us today, where we will be in conversation with Rhea Leonard, one of the Green Space Miami inaugural initiative awardees. Green Space Miami, whose mission is to be a catalyst for action through community partnership and collaboration, is the Green Family Foundation's new art space, guided by the foundation's principle of inclusion, community empowerment, and education. Through Green Space Initiative, we invested in highlighting the work of artists whose brilliance, ingenuity, vision, character exemplify who and what Miami is all about. We are dedicated to providing a platform for these artists, and today's Green Space Miami Talk features one of those inaugural grantees. Rhea Leonard, born and raised in Miami, Florida, is an African-American artist that utilizes drawing, printmaking, and sculpture within her art practice. She explores the topics highlighting the Black body and how society affects Black life through her detailed and poignant figurative works. She received her MFA from Florida International University and her BFA from University of Florida through New World School of Arts. Her artwork has been on display at the Patricia and Philip Frost Art Museum, the African Heritage Cultural Arts Center, and the Arts and Cultural Center of Hollywood. Her work has been published in Gumbo Magazine, issue 001, the New York Times, the Biscayne Times, and the Miami Times. She's attended art residencies at the Atlantic Center for the Arts and the Anderson Ranch Arts Center. As a 2018 recipient of the Betty Laird Perry Award, her work is part of the Betty Laird Perry Emerging Artist Collection at the Patricia and Philip Frost Art Museum. And she is also a 2020 Green Space Initiative grant recipient. You didn't hear it here from me, folks. She is currently a resident artist of the Bakehouse Art Complex in Miami, Florida, and an adjunct instructor at the New World School of the Arts. And joining Rhea today in conversation is Jacqui Colyer, an avid learner, historian, and community advocate that was born in Charleston, South Carolina, but reared here in Miami, Florida. She is deeply connected to her Liberty City, referring to herself as its daughter. Schooled in Dade County Public Schools, she continued her education at Winthrop University for her undergraduate degree. She completed her master's degree at Barry University and is a doctoral candidate at the University of Miami in higher education. Starting her career as a social worker within the Department of Children and Families and Big Brothers and Sisters, she started teaching introduction courses at Florida Memorial University, becoming a professor at Miami-Dade College for 17 years. But let's keep in mind that grant writing led to her career in housing. Jacqui wrote a grant for the Dade County Department of Housing and later became the Director of Resident Services at the Department of Housing. She eventually rose to become the Regional Director of the Florida Department of Children and Families in Miami and Chicago. As a leader in the community, Jacqui has served on several boards, workforce development boards, the Children's Trust, the Overtown Advisory Board, and Catalyst Miami, to name a few. Jacqui discovered a talent she had not noticed on the way to retirement when her friend and mentor, Dr. Enid Pinkney, asked her to serve on the board of the historic Hampton House. The joy of learning about and remembering the past, her history and her community's history, and the stories that she heard of during the Jim Crow era shaped how they shaped her community. Because of that, Jacqui began her encore career in historic preservation and restoration. This passion has led to her and her sister resecuring homes in Liberty City neighborhoods. Her current project, the historic Lindsay House, once owned by a Miami entrepreneur, one of the wealthiest Black men in Miami during the 1930s and 40s. But his story has been lost to history because no one has told us his account or any of the stories of community that share in what happened. And thus, historic preservation and restoration has become her passion, her new vocation, her career. And we have none other than MJ Fievre, our esteemed moderator, who has a BS and ED. Born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, she's a longtime educator whose publishing career began as a teenager in Haiti. At just 19 years old, she signed her first book contract with Hachette Deschamps in Haiti for the publication of a young adult book titled La Statue Maléfique. MJ, correct me if I'm wrong. I gotta work on it. Since then, MJ, fine. Yeah, I did all right. Since then, MJ has authored 9 books in French that are widely read in Europe and the French Antilles. MJ moved to the United States in 2002. She is a creator of safe spaces, an initiator of difficult conversations. MJ spent much time building up her Black students, helping them feel comfortable in their skin and affirming their identities. Her close relationships with parents and students led her to look more closely at how we can balance protecting a child's innocence while preparing them for the realities of Black life. She is the author of A Sky, the Color of Chaos, about her childhood in Haiti during the brutal regime of Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Also, Happy, Okay? Poems about anxiety, depression, hope, and survival. Badass Black Girl, Empowered Black Girl, and Resilient Black Girl. In collaboration with best-selling author Becca Anderson, MJ has also published a productivity toolkit, Your Work from Home Life. Very, very important at this time. She's a frequent keynote speaker, such as speaking at Tufts University, Massachusetts, Howard University, Washington, D.C., the University of Miami here in Florida, and the Michael College in Vermont. She's also been a panelist at the Association of Writers and Writing Program Conference. MJ helps others write their way through trauma to build community and create social change. She works with veterans, disenfranchised youth, cancer patients, and survivors, victims of domestic and sexual violence, minorities, elderly, those with chronic illness or going through any transition in underserved populations, those who are in need of writing as a form of therapy, even if they don't realize that they need writing as such. And for her blog, MJ has interviewed legendary writers such as Edwidge Danticat, Nikki Giovanni, and Alice Randall. She currently lives in Winter, Florida Garden with her husband and artist, Thomas Logan, but right now we have the privilege of having her here. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, MJ.
Hello, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. I've been excitedly waiting to have this conversation with Miss Rhea and Miss Jacqui. We've been talking a little bit behind the scenes, and actually, Miss Jacqui, my first question is for you. You've compared Rhea's art to the work of Maya Angelou. I think you were more specifically referring to Phenomenal Woman. You talked about Nikki Giovanni and Nina Simone and all those strong Black women and how they reminded you, how Rhea's work reminded you of their work. Would you expand a little on that thought? And Rhea, of course, you're welcome to comment on that as well.
Please do. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Z. I had almost looked behind me to see who you were talking about, but thank you. And MJ, I am glad that you asked me the first question because, I get to be the teacher's pet today. So that's a good thing. But I tell you what, I looked at, and I think it's Machinations. Is that the piece that I'm in love with? Yeah. And I see that photo. I see that there it is, Machinations. And I look at her arms and I look at the color and I look at it and it reminds me so much of Phenomenal Woman, especially when it says, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. And even though you don't see the curl of her lips, we see the first line, which is the span, the reach of my arms. And you wonder, is she reaching out or is she reaching back or is she reaching forward? And I guess Rhea would have to help us with that. But I like to think, when I look at it, that she's reaching forward, that she's reaching into the future, that she's building out her arms in a way that says, I can do this, and as women, we are always in the position of thinking about, what's next? How much more can I do? How much more do I have to do? Even more so. So, that's what I was thinking about. And when I, because I'm old school, right? I'm probably both of your grandmothers. But what I love is the fact that, I grew up with Nikki Giovanni singing, not Nikki Giovanni. I grew up with, whatever, I'll think of it in a minute, singing
Nina
Young,
Simone.
Gifted, and, excuse me?
Nina Simone.
Nina Simone. Thank you so much. You do know these things, right? Somebody taught you about them. But Nina Simone, I was in college singing, Young, Gifted, and Black throughout my dorm. And I just loved it because when I look at, when I look at Rhea and I think about, having watched a generation come to fruition. It's like amazing. And I have to think that all of those marches that I went on and all of those protests that I did really made a difference, because there were no Rheas when I was growing up. There were a few, but none with the talent that shows forth, that I'm looking at right now. So I know Rhea gets embarrassed easily, so I'm not going to keep going on. But those are the things that I see, and that's how I feel about her art, and what the kind of impressions that it invokes in me.
Ria, how does it feel to be compared to those people? We're talking about Nikki, Nina, Maya.
I mean, we talked a little bit about this behind the scenes. I mean, to even be in the same breath as the legends that I looked to when I was trying to figure out my research, trying to figure out how I wanted to go about depicting this subject matter, because I am young. Like, my story is still very, very early in its stages, but going through a process of unlearning internalized racism, anti-Blackness, and this idea that had been instilled in me from the society that I live in, to hate myself, to hate how my hair naturally grows, to hate the face that I was born with in the mirror. Every day I woke up and leaving this sense of like unease that why can't I just be happy about the way I look? So looking to Nina Simone, hearing her words, listening and reading the words of Maya Angelou, these were the strong women that I looked to when I was looking for a sense of being proud of my Blackness. Because at least I can be honest to say that I was kind of searching and struggling to find that in art. And I was very hard pressed to find an artist that was approaching the topics that I wanted to approach and doing it in a way that doesn't re-traumatize me or the viewer with the subject matter of racism and all these difficult things that the Black community has gone through. So just being in the same conversation, like, oh my gosh, that's the greatest gift, because their words, their songs are instilled in these images so that it even comes back to you when you're viewing it. That means, oh my gosh, I'm not there yet, but I'm getting close. That means I drank my fill and it's coming out in the work.
I think you're closer than you think, because when I look at your art, I like I said, I'm just amazed, because as young as you are, you think that you're not there, but you're really, really closer than you think, because in this community and in this country, we have been taught, just like you said, to not like ourselves. For years, I think about hair, and I think about my body, shape and size and everything. And for years, I was made to feel embarrassed and ashamed. But when I look at, what your art, I think to myself, wow, this is really, really amazing. And I think that the last slide, the slide before this one, that shows the cover, of over the eyes that are, that yes,
Sisters,
yes.
yeah.
It's the forces, right, that you don't see, like nobody sees how we've been taught. Nobody here, but us, here's what, that your hair isn't whatever, good hair, or that your skin color tone is too deep, or any of those things that we deal with on a daily basis and in our lives as we just continue to try and grow. And the good news is we're evolving, so that's always so special and always so good. So I'm just, like I said, when I saw your art in the green, in the green space, I was like, whoa, who is this young woman? And I'm so glad that I got the chance, to meet you, to talk with you, and to share how my sister and I have felt about, your art when we viewed it. So here's to you.
Young, gifted, and Black.
Young, gifted, and Black.
In Miami. Let's talk a little bit about Miami. Rhea, you mentioned art as a salve. as you faced some issues that many Black people face, racism, microaggression. Let's talk a little bit about how Black life and Black issues in Miami specifically inform your work. And I'm also curious about whether you think that Black artists in the United States are still living in the fringes of the art world.
I would say growing up in Miami, it gave me the necessary, I would say, the time to grow up in a sense of Miami is a cultural like melting pot. There's a lot of people of color here, and I remember just sitting in class, like white kids were in the minority in my class most often. Like my class was mostly Cuban kids, and then I would say there were a lot of Black kids or kids of Black and Latin descent, and then the white kids there'd be like one or two. So it wasn't so much as being a person of color was always the minority. It was actually the other side of the spectrum growing up and realizing and looking back. As much as my friends, we never treated each other any differently. It's something that comes with growing up as a Black person or a person of color in America. You start learning more about the nuances of racism, that they manifest in different ways, in different things. And it's not necessarily that a child would understand that, but looking back on some of my interactions with my friends' parents, like going over to their house, and at the time you're thinking there's nothing wrong, but then when you grow up and then it's blatant in your face and you're 20 years old, you're like, hey, why do I feel this way? And it's like, oh, this isn't the first time I've felt this before. I experienced this at 7 and 8 years old at such and such place. And just growing up in Miami and realizing that the prejudice is not just coming from white people; it's coming from other people of color. And in Miami, when we have people of different backgrounds of the diaspora here, I was actually exposed to my friends who I considered Black, and then I would say, hey, like I would try to bond with them because we were like the two darkest kids in the class. And like, oh, I'm not Black, and I was like, oh, then what are you? Because I mean, where I'm from, at least my family from the South, like there's no other thing because my parents are from South Carolina, Georgia on my mom's side, and then like north on my dad's side. But it's, enslaved Black Americans on both sides of my family. So there is no, oh, I get to deny my Blackness because I came from a small island or a certain side of an island. So having that thrown into the understanding of Blackness, and not just how my struggle of Blackness manifested, but how it shows up in different cultures throughout the diaspora, I feel like that really allowed me to be very sensitive to how I talk about Blackness, and we'll probably get to this later on, but looking at colorism and how different shades of Blackness affect your reality in this world. And that I feel just like all of this of what I experienced growing up here, it's all in my work, but I talk about it in different stages as I get through my own journey of unlearning negative and poisonous behavior. But I believe going back to it, like Black artists, at least in the United States, I feel like we had spent so much time out on the street. We've just recently gotten invited to the front yard. I don't know if I would say that the front door is quite open to us just yet, getting us off the fringe, but it's getting there. I just feel like we're more invited as a guest instead of as part of the family of the art world. And I feel like I want that to change. And I feel like it's going to change soon because a lot of Black artists, we're not taking no for an answer. We're not going to take crumbs anymore. And it's like, if we're going to have discussions, if institutions are saying, hey, we want to engage in these topics, it's not going to be anymore, hey, we can have this one thing and it's relegated to this month of the year. No, we're going to have this 365. And then you're going to be asked to have this conversation in context with all the other shows that you have, because it's not just a question of trying to address it when you're comfortable. It's because these communities that you're reaching out to, these problems don't stop the rest of the months of the year just because, oh yeah, you celebrated us once. So I'm hoping that the art world gets real about it. I mean, I'm not trying to sound bitter, but I'm just kind of tired of the lukewarm reception. Like, we want to welcome you in, but we're afraid that what happens if we really let you inside. And like, I mean, it's long overdue. Things could happen, but yeah, we could mess some stuff up, but we're not saying that the way things were.
Jacqui, Miss Jacqui.
Sorry. But yeah,
Oh,
those are my
like,
feelings on
well,
this.
Rhea, you were talking. I was looking at Miss Jackie because one thing that she mentioned earlier is that she's from a different generation. Um, and I'm wondering how you feel, Miss Jackie, about what Rhea said, because it seems like um, uh, the more things change, the more they stay the same. How do you feel about the
Yeah,
fight that we have to put out as artists to claim a seat at the table, the proverbial table?
you know, there's this saying that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And I think that that's what happens to us a lot of times. We're not at the table, so as a result, we end up being, picked over and not invited to be in the room and sitting at the table. One of the neat things that I just heard, Rhea state is that we're not just going to sit by the side door and not say anything. And there was, it seems like at least as I've viewed, my lifespan, I grew up protesting and demonstrating and all of those things. You know, the reason that I love Dr. Pinckney is because she basically saved me from being expelled from the Dade County Public Schools for leading a demonstration at Miami Edison Senior High School as a senior. And so it seemed like a generation came, and I think we thought we had overcome. So we just, said, oh, okay, so it's all done now. The Civil Rights Bill is passed. The Housing Rights Bill is passed. Everything is passed. We're in good shape. When in reality, those laws did pass, but it didn't really change the tenor of what was happening in this country. I don't think that I've seen the kind of vigilance and demonstration until this young generation that's coming up right now, because they remind me so much of myself back. I'm not going to say how long ago, but a few years back, when I was demonstrating. The fact that we have folks that are standing up and saying this is not how we're going to be treated. This is not what we're going to accept. And in the art world, I think it's even more relevant and prevalent, because I go into different places and they make space for us, but there's a difference between making space for us and having spaces and knowing that we're going to be included and showing that in all of the galleries. I think it was, just recently we had Basel, right? But Black artists ought to be in every part of that, not just the section over here for them and the individual things that we have for them. It all ought to be a part of who we are. And, if we could be more honest about the real history of this country, then we could be really honest about what our art should look like, what our history should talk about, etc. I think about Liberty Square, which is, the heart of Liberty City, and I'm the daughter of Liberty City. I think about the fact that in 1937, Liberty Square was built. The feds came in. They said, we got to do something about Overtown. We're going to build Liberty Square to, as a place for Black people to live. The sad part is 10 years earlier, that land was owned, and the Seminole Indians lived on that land. And I want you to let that sink in for a minute, because even though we're talking about ourselves, when we look at all of this, you can see that the whole idea of how this country has treated people of color is just something that you really have to look at and almost shake your head, because, we can't understand it. But 1927, the Seminoles are on the land. 1937, the African Americans on the land. And in 2021, 22, who's on the land now? It's being gentrified, so no matter, and so I think a part of what we have to do is always find a way to be at the table where the decisions are being made in art, in our history, and in the places that, we have lived. So, I look at Rhea and I'm so glad to see young people, really having this conversation. And I applaud the Green Family Foundation for actually bringing this kind of discussion to the table. Even though it's in the arts, the arts are a part of and are inculcated into everything that we do, at least for my life it is. So to me, it's about how we figure this out and how we make sure that we are included and that we are at the table and that we are a part of all of this. And Rhea, I'm glad you're there because you are one strong, young Black woman who has found a sense of who she is. And, that makes me feel proud. It makes me feel good that, I got put in jail at 14 for protesting. So, I knew that it pays off, but it shouldn't have taken, I'm not going to tell you how many years, but it shouldn't have taken over 50 years for these kinds of changes, to happen.
So listening to you, both of you talk about history and the struggles that we are still facing, I can't help but think about one of my favorite pieces by you, Rhea. It's titled "You Died Screaming." And what really stayed with me looking at this particular piece is the strength, the power that emanates from it. You don't ever seem to victimize your subjects. And it's so easy. It would have been so easy for you to go that way because we've been through so much as a people, as Black women, but you don't. Is that a conscious choice for you to show that strength about the women that you share with us?
Oh, absolutely. Because I don't see my forebears or my ancestors as victims. Though they may have gone through traumatic things, their struggle and their plight and their willingness to stay strong is the reason I'm here today. And I tell people all the time with any breath that I have that my art practice is in homage to them. I do it in honor of my ancestors because I don't think my ancestors could have imagined that they're going to have a great, great descendant that literally she does not have to work for every single meal that she needs. She's literally studying at the height of what society expects as the hierarchy of needs. It's art. My job is to reflect on society as a whole and to create images, pictures that people look at to reassess and to do internal investigations. So my work, I believe, is celebration of life. So victimization is nowhere in the conversation. While my images or my figures are put into difficult to bear circumstances, that's more of something that happens in the viewer's minds. But I always make sure to have my depiction show up in such a way that there's always that glimmer of hope. Because with You Died Screaming, it's a sense of she has no legs, or the figure has, I should say this in state, that my figures aren't actually, like, I don't necessarily see them as people, but more as constructs or identities taken human form, or like identities personified. So this idea of this figure going through such a difficult situation, one arm tied behind their back, literally hollowed out, there's nothing left, everything's been taken from the inside, but you still see this figure dragging themselves forward with what hand that they still have under their capacity to move, and they're still moving forward. And I know it's titled Pierce because that's what's going on with the figure, but You Died Screaming is the other part of the title. And most people think of that as a very traumatic thing, but in my own mind, I feel like to be at the last moment of your life and to use that last bit of energy to scream, to say, not even in pain, because I don't always think a scream is necessarily in pain. It could be a scream or an affirmation of, I'm here, I'm alive, or I was here, or, hey, look at me. This is what they're doing to me. This is what they've done to me. I'm not going to go out quietly. And I really do feel like that is the type of energy that I like to bring to my work. And victimization is not something that I want to focus on. Like, I feel like in bringing in victimization, you're looking at how whiteness plays a part into it. You're looking at how other groups are acting upon my blackness. My blackness is not something that incites violence. That's a choice other people make. So when I make my work, I'm not thinking of non-black people gazes when I'm creating my work. I'm thinking about the young black woman who comes into my studio and says, hey, I recognize that hairstyle. Like, I had that hairstyle back when I was a kid. And creating those moments where my audience or my ideal audience can see themselves in the work, because that's another thing, not being able to see affirmation of myself and my features in a lot of contemporary work. That's another thing that I was kind of stuck for when I was doing my research. But in providing that, I don't want to re-traumatize my audience. I want to mention, hey, fellow black girl, fellow black woman, I know it's hard. And every time, this image is a great conversation starter for that. And it's like, hey, I had one of those days and this image just reminds me of it. But there's something about it it's uplifting me. As difficult as it is, it's uplifting me to go forward because I know I have to. And not also that I have to, but I know that there's something in me that's going to allow me to do so. So, yeah, that's what I aim for in my work. So victimization, no. We don't, not to say that it's not something that we do need to take into account and think about, but in my work, that's not what I really do want to focus on.
And the fact that she's still standing.
Hey,
I
yes.
mean, even with everything that's going on, she's still standing.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love this idea of the figures, of them representing ideas, the embodiment of feelings and just of your perspective of the world. And this got me thinking about the Black female body in general as a topic, and what it means to you to live in a Black body, to have Black hair, to have a Black shape. And why do you think a conversation about the Black female body makes so many people uncomfortable, including Black women themselves sometimes?
It took me a while to love the form I take in this life. And honestly, getting to where I'm at, I feel like I won the lottery. Like, I mean, not everyone in the world gets to look this good. Like, not to toot my own horn, but I feel like it's such an uncomfortable situation because it goes back to the isms, like, or whatever, misogyny, racism, and just being a woman on top of that. You're not a man, but being Black, you're not white, you don't conform to their beauty standards. So this double outlier on me, it creates this situation. I don't think people understand how much of a situation it creates. And I mean, there's a lot more conversation now going around it, but it's just the stark contrast of you could have Black features, curly hair, everything. As long as it's not on a Black woman, people will eat it up, and it makes no sense. But the moment you call it out, people have something to say as contrary. But if you try to uplift a Black woman with said features, there's nitpicking going left and right. And I just really feel like these poisons from both ends mixed together has created this really, really toxic poison that even I had to expel from my own system. And I feel that there's a lot of Black women. We have the natural hair movement going, where we had to literally just have this conversation like, there's no reason that my hair should not look okay for the workplace. I'm not doing anything different. It makes no sense. Why do I need to straighten or chemically damage my hair? For what reason? My hair isn't hurting anyone. It's not bothering anyone. And I mean, if anything, if you can't take your eyes off of it, just pay the compliment and keep it pushing. But I feel like Black women, because we're raised in this society, we're always told, straighten your hair. It's not an education about letting your hair be natural. It's more about controlling your hair. And that's most of the symbols or most of the like messaging that we get early on. So perms were a huge thing back in the day. Hot combs were a huge thing. And I mean, I couldn't stand any of the processes. I'm like, the fits and the arguments I got into with my mom about it. But once I got to a certain age, I learned to do my own hair because I really don't like people touching me. So that, I think that also played into me just really wanting to emancipate myself, at least from that situation of having other people touch my hair. Even just it being my mom, I just don't do that, because it was such a visceral reaction. Like, why does my hair always have to be manipulated for me to go in public? So I think it's just a journey that Black women we need to be on, and I'm glad that we're uplifting each other with it, because I'm not saying that I'm completely expelled, because sometimes I just don't have the energy to deal with my own hair, and that's really because I'm literally just starting out, maybe 5-6 years of getting in the habit of dealing with my hair. But if I had done that as a child, if I had been encouraged as a child, don't look at your hair as something you need to tame, but something you manage, it would be I feel like I'd be a different person. But I'm all over the place with this, but those things are just so intertwined. But Ms. Jacqui, if you want to jump in with this, because I feel like
I was just thinking about this. It's not only hair, but both of us are dark complexioned women,
mm-hmm.
and being a dark complexioned woman, just really brings about a whole different experience than women who have a lighter complexion. I remember, and this is crazy, right? Because this comes from Black people, which is that's what really makes you crazy. Like the paper bag test. I wanted to go to Fisk University because that's where my best friend was going to school. And they asked for a photo, and I thought, this doesn't look good or sound good. So I just didn't apply, because I really felt that, I wasn't going to be accepted. Or if I was accepted, then I would have to prove myself to my own folks. I think that if you ever get a chance, and I know you've probably seen it already, Rhea or MJ or Pam, and that's Spike Lee's movie School Days. None of you see? Have you ever seen my
For sure.
Okay, the whole thing with the wannabes and the jigaboos. It's like this is really real. He just made it into something that was basically not sarcasm but irony in terms of how you look at all of this, because you never expect it, or at least I didn't, and I didn't understand it at first. And so, I made some choices in life, in terms of the school I went to, because I just did not want I didn't want my own people to make me feel bad. I mean, I can deal with it from white people, because it's like, hey, I think that they think that that's their, or at least then they thought that was part of what they did. So it's just interesting, some of the choices that you have to make, because you just don't want to hurt yourself any more than, or be hurt, any more than you have to. And that was one of the things that I thought would really just kind of would hurt me more than going to an Anglo school, and being treated a certain way. Besides, I can protest at an Anglo school. Who was I going to protest to at Fisk? Think about it. So, hopefully, and I know it's changed, because I've been on the campuses of several HBCUs, and I know that has changed. But like I said, back when I went to school, it just wasn't quite that way. And so I think that we have to deal with not only the hair, but with the complexion and with our body shapes, because we have this wonderful S in our bodies that is just so cool to me. I thought it was always cool, but somehow or another, someone made a comment, and it made me think about it, because I'd never thought about it as anything but a positive, because I just know that the men that I loved it. So it's like, hey, this will work for me, you know? So, you know, that was how I went with the flow on that one. And and the women in your in your painting, I mean in your art, have that S body, you know, that just really curvy curvy kind of body. And that's why when I looked at Phenomenal Woman, I'm like, this is Phenomenal Woman, you know, it's just that's who this is. That's who most of these women are. It's in the, you know, it's in the thighs, my head, it's on the way I twist my hair. It's like, whoa. You know, so yeah.
I have to say that I feel so lucky to live in a world where I can speak with people like Rhea. Uh,
Really?
right here, an artist, a black female artist who can just, I can just have a conversation with you about your art and the ideas behind it. Because when I was growing up, it was hard for me to find people who look just like me that were accessible, because for sure those people were in the fringes much more than they are today. I'm thinking about the books that I read. Whenever there was a black girl in those books that I was reading as a kid, she had to be a sidekick. She was never the main character. And whereas what is considered mainstream art and music is everywhere, I feel that I always had to make a conscious effort to find black art. It's not that it didn't exist. We always had a lot of people in our community working on art, music. You have it, but you had to look for it because that's not the kind of art that was being advertised. And I feel that now with a program like this one, where we get to actually meet the artists and talk to them, and they get to share the ideas behind the art, it's extraordinary. And I'm really lucky. I feel lucky to be living right here, right now.
You know, and I was thinking the same thing, MJ. I was thinking how lucky I am to be a part of a community where I really get to see young black women, young black men as artists. Because, you know, even though we had art classes in school and art classes at the YMCA that I went to during the summers, there was never a real venue for our art, and there was never a real, you know, opportunity to really show our art. You know, like I said, I'm just glad to be around long enough to to see this, because there's so many people who, you know, have left here who never got to see or see the art of Rhea or of many of the young black artists who are on the scene today. You know, and so you know, so it just really, really, really feels good to me. And I'm, like you say, MJ, I'm just like, wow. You know, maybe we're going to get there. I know we're
For
going to get
sure.
there. I know we're going to get there. I've got
And
no. Go ahead.
I was just going to clarify. It's not that those books and the artwork didn't exist, right? We've always
Existed.
had our Maya Angelou's. We've always had our Nina Simone. But you had to know about them to have access to their work. You had to be in those circles.
Correct.
And right now, you walk into a university and you get to take a class with Rhea because she's right there. And I mean, this is huge. And it's all because black artists have persevered, even when doors were being closed, even when people were not taken seriously, and in some cases, even when other people were stealing their work, and they stayed in anonymity, they were still producing art. And I'm looking at Rhea, so young, so motivated, doing big things, and it's an inspiration for all the generations. Those were are lucky enough to know you in person, and those who are coming, knowing that you're tracing a path for them, that you're here, you exist, you share what you feel, and your work is spectacular and beautiful.
Yeah.
It's
Same thing. I think about Rosie Gordon Wallace, is it, over at Bakehouse, and I remember when she got started, and I thought to myself, where was Rosie, and where was this, Bakehouse and studios, and I thought to myself, how cool is this to be able to have that kind of opportunity right in your own community, and for years and years, it, was there, and now it's just, I don't know. I mean, Rosie has really turned it into something absolutely amazing. So, yeah, I remember when it was just the old, was it Wholesome or Marita Bakery or something or another? That's how it got the name Bakehouse. But it was, has turned into an amazing campus with artists that can have places where they can be free to create. So that says a lot. So thank goodness for, the pioneers who stood up and said, hey, we got to do this. And, for those who had that kind of vision and who could see that there would be Rheas that would come along and who would find that as a home. So, yeah. And we got wonderful studios now that, that celebrate our art. I mean, how often do you have a green space? I mean, where were y'all when I wanted to be an artist? Z?
Well, they're here now.
No. I think I found what I really, really need to do. So yeah, but I'm glad that I can participate and witness it, as I go through green space. And because it's so close to my house, I just kind of go down there and look like, hey, this is really, really cool. So yeah.
I wanted to go back to something that Rhea mentioned. It's another difficult topic, this idea of colorism. Both you, Rhea, and you, Jacqui, you talked a little bit about that. And I want to link it to the conscious choice that you've made, Rhea, to work in black and white. And I'm astonished by your adroit use of shades, tones, in one piece in particular, a piece that Miss Jacqui did mention, the machinations of self-love in the age of racial violence. You have the blackout hands, the braids that are soldered to the skin. All this made me think about the issues of colorism and internalized racism. Those are issues that we grapple with. And I wanted to know a little bit more about how you personally have experienced colorism, internalized racism, microaggressions, and if you could talk a little bit about the code switching that we Black women often have to resort to so that we may fit in.
In my work, I know, since I decided I was going to work in the black and white spectrum, because I find color, it's used sometimes throughout my practice, but I try to not use it unless it's super important. And I knew from the moment that I was going to start focusing in the grayscale that I needed to be careful not to stop shading my figures after a certain point, because, I'm going to get a little technical, start speaking some artist speak, but to push the tonal range or the tonal values in graphite, it takes a lot of layering and constantly going over the surface over and over to build material on the surface. So for example, the tone you see going on in the hair, the different textures or the darkness of the hair, that's all done in pencil. It's a different material than what was applied to the hands. So the hair and the skin are basically both graphite, but the hair had a much longer process time of applying materials in order for it to get that dark. So I wanted to be careful not to have my figures, their skin, all fall within the same tonal range, because I started thinking about colorism and starting to think about, if I want my practice to be open to all members of the Black community, I don't want to only represent the lighter or fairer skin members of the Black community, because that would start playing into things that I had felt growing up as one of the darkest kids in my family, and just kind of, you're going out going to Sunset, being a teenager, going to catch a movie with friends and family, and all the young boys, they go talk to your friends, but don't talk to me. I mean, granted, I was kind of a loner, so I didn't mind, but looking back on it, these are the things that are kind of like insidious. It's similar to having a racist encounter with a racist person. You're not sure if it's actually their prejudice or if it's they're just having a bad day. So I'll like never know if the reason no one talked to me is because, I mean, I'm the darker one of all of them and I was less desirable, or if it's just, hey, I just didn't catch anyone's fancy. But I do find sometimes, at least in academia, I was treated a little differently because, granted, I'm the only Black person in the room, still darker than everyone. I stick out like a sore thumb. People feel the need to grill me about artwork, and once they realize that I can snap back, I'm literally at the top of the class. I'm not here slacking. I'm just minding my business. They literally leave me alone, and I think that's why I kind of gravitated toward academia. It's like once you can prove that you know what you're doing, people don't bother you no more. And I felt, I guess, a sort of validation that it's like, even if I'm going to be the only Black person in the room, I just have to be smarter than that one white kid who thinks they know everything, and I'm usually there. So I never really had a problem. But at least in my personal life, like you said, Miss Jacqui, it hurts when it comes from your own people. So I try to make sure that I don't have my figures all representing that same light shade, and I try to make sure that I have a range of tones in the figures that I depict. Yeah. And I'm sorry, MJ, what was the other part of your question? I kind of blanked.
Oh, the second part of the question was how you personally experienced some of those issues, racism, microaggressions, and if you could talk about that. You mentioned art as a solve, and we definitely get the relationship that exists with your experience and the art that you create. But I'm interested in going further and kind of talk about, I guess, when I think about the art world and the generations of artists. So we've talked about our foremothers and forefathers. I'm also curious about how you see the impact maybe in artists that are even younger when you think about those issues of colorism, code switching. I just wanted to kind of continue this conversation because we talked a little bit about colorism and then we entered other topics. I just wanted to continue the conversation and make sure that you've expressed everything that you have to share about it.
Oh, okay. I would say going back to code switching, because that is something I kind of forgot about that, but that was something that played a part in a lot of my earlier artworks, at least that are from this series, and this idea where I was trying to come to terms with this idea of operating in one space, but also trying to operate in another, and how do I show that using one figure? So I was my work went through a process of constantly, not constantly, but having this duality to it, or having my figures have a duality where you'll see multiple actions superimposed upon one another, and trying to get closer to this feeling or this sense of managing my words during critique, but at the same time feeling my own emotions, where I'm trying to be as calm as possible so I don't come off as an angry Black woman, but at the same time I'm still trying to relegate my own emotions on the inside, and then trying to explain that to my colleagues so they understand what's going on in the image. And I believe I was really, really early in that process. I haven't really gone back to that, but this idea of the immense energy it takes to deal with racism on a daily basis, having to deal with that, having to be a Black person on top of being a woman, and then adding all of that together, it's like, when is there enough time to even just take care of oneself? And granted, yes, we can code switch. It's a superpower. I still don't know where I learned it, but I know I can do it. And people tell me I do it flawlessly, but it's it's just, I just wonder what it would be like to live in a world where that's not necessary. To like just be able to operate, wake up. What is it like to wake up and just be who you are and not have to think, oh, how does my face look? Am I walking into the room and like, what's my expression? I don't want people to think that there's something wrong, or I'm angry, or I'm posing a threat, because I'm also a little bit taller than everyone else when I walk into a room. So it's like, how always trying to think I'm trying to be me, but is everyone else comfortable? And it's just so tiring. I would love to know what, it's just existence, at least as a Black person, it's multi-layered and tiring. So if anyone else would like to jump in, I just, my words are limited. My story is very short, and I just know what it feels like. I just haven't dealt with it enough to like put it all in to an interesting story. Anyone?
Yeah.
Z, I saw you reacting.
Yeah. I just think that one of the things that's the funniest thing about it is that when you're on the telephone and you use your code switch, right? And then the person says something that is a microaggression, borderline racism, and then they meet you in person and they go like, did I say that to you on the telephone? Yes, you did. So it's those kinds of experiences where people think that you're one thing because they can't see you, and they think how smart you are and how funny you are. And then when they meet you, they go, are you who I talked to on the phone? Then you know that, yeah, you've gotten the bite. So, those are my stories. I got a million of them, but if I go into all of them, we'll be here till next week. So.
Well, we started this conversation talking about Miami. Maybe we can end it talking about Miami again. What are we looking at? What does the future of the art scene in Miami look like? What do you want to see happening, Rhea? How do you see the generation that will be there 20 years from now? How do you see them manage the art world that already exists right here in Miami?
I mean, if I could tell the future, I probably wouldn't be an artist, but I mean, I would just, I'm just being real. I probably wouldn't be an artist, but I would hope that, and I usually when people ask about what my hopes are, it's like my hopes are never any big, because I kind of have this thing where I don't want to be disappointed, so I aim lower. But not even to say that this is so low, but I would just hope that younger Black artists that come in and start working, that they don't go through the struggles that me and my friends did. Like, because I have other Black art friends where we're always constantly asking each other, or at least back in the day, we're like, so do you know anyone who's done this with painting and ceramic, bringing it together into one? It's like always searching, very similar to what you were saying, MJ. It's not to say that these artists weren't doing work. It's the fact that the gaze was not on them and their practices were not recorded for history. So it just sitting, I just would hope for the future that they don't experience that frustration of sitting in the library, constantly going through book after book, looking for inspiration, looking for someone that had similar life experience and expressed it in their artwork that they could start looking from to evolve their practice, and just being frustrated that there's literally no one there. And it's not even, and it's like, I think in the back of my mind, we knew that these artists existed. It's just, they decided to focus on Picasso for the entire era instead of other people. It's like, how many books do you need on these handful of artists that literally you go through art history classes over and over, and it's just the same people? It's like, can I get a new name, please? So I would hope that with Kehinde Wiley, Kara Walker, Lorna Simpson, all these people doing their work, that there is more written on them. It's not just showing their images in the same regurgitation of the same analysis of their work, but that people from my generation start getting a hold of it and start seeing and are applying our contemporaneous experiences onto this work, and how bringing it forward into the future rather than leaving it stuck, where art world likes to leave things stuck in its time period, they think, oh, that's what they did back then. That's not relevant. But I always feel like artworks evolve with those who are looking at it. So I would hope future artists coming behind us, it's so weird because it's so weird to think of them like that I'm not them, because I still feel like I'm still an art student. It's weird. But further down the line, I just hope that there's more of us, more Black artists having a variety of investigations, a variety of approaches. And I really feel like when we add more people to the conversation, and I'm talking artists, like the viewers as well, but when we add more artists exploring and investigating similar situations, and we all have our own different approaches, I feel like something great can happen, because that's when you start having people, I'm looking at this person and this person, who were looking at poets and dancers, and just having that amalgamation of conversation, that cacophony of a whole bunch of ideas in one situation where you can just grab. There's so many people to look at that you don't even know how to keep it straight. That's what I would hope for the future artists going forward, because I mean, I'm starting to get that now, and it's a shame, because now I'm like teaching. I'm a teacher. I don't have that luxury to be in grad school till 2 a.m. in my studio just reading theory books, reading James Baldwin. I don't have time like that anymore. So it's like all these artists are coming out, and it's like I want to just get into your work, but it's like these lesson plans don't write themselves. So it's like I'm trying to still balance my practice and still stay with my foot in all this beautiful work that's being created as well. But yeah, I feel like the time passed me by, but there are more people coming up, and I'm so excited for the future artists coming in. They've got so much to look forward to.
And I'm going to ditto that, because I think that we are on our way in Miami, and I'm excited for the future, and I'm excited for young Black artists in the future.
Thank you so much, Rhea, Miss Jacqui. Thank you for this conversation today. It was inspiring. I was looking forward to this, and you guys did not disappoint. So much great insight on art in Miami, being a Black woman in 2022, and what that means in terms of what we're producing. And we even got to talk about the future. We don't have the magic ball, but I appreciate your words so much.
I do not have the words. This is that's usually not a problem that I have, but I was sitting here taking my notes. I mean, we all met a little bit before this, and we kind of sat down in conversation. And this is, I can say for the second time with you three, that I find myself in a cultivated space that is liberating. So thank you all, not only for inviting me into this space and conversation, but our audience today, our audience who will watch this. For MJ, those young Black powerful girls that are reading your books, that are looking around, like Rhea said, when they're sitting down and saying, I want to do my own research, I want to dive more into this, they get to turn around with your book in hand, and they can look at Rhea's work. And when they finish looking at Rhea's work, they can take a trip down to the historic Hampton house and see their history of their Miami. So thank you all. This is, because I'm without words, I want to invoke the words of Bell Hooks, who shared that to build community requires vigilant awareness of the work that we must continually do to undermine all the socialization that leads us to behave in ways that perpetuate domination. Rhea, your work is doing this. When we change how we and others see images, we change the world as we manifest those worlds. Today, we discuss the ability to use the language of art to unlink the chains of the anchors that are holding us back from our shore. There is a nuanced and layered experience of Black women. And your art, Rhea, and today's conversation just holds a mirror up to the truth of the discomfort that is imposed upon Black women that others may try to ignore, diminish, negate, avoid. And yet, in today's reflection, we also see the regenerative powers of self-care, self-love, self-preservations that come from self-agency. These conversations highlight the power, strength, energy, and undiluted truth of Black women creatives in their full embodiment. So I want to thank the three of you for sharing your history, our community's history, and for bringing to light that through our excavation of collective identity, we can all make the conscientious effort to elevate the work and lived experiences that will impact our society for generations to come. Thank you. And I want to share with our audience, each one of the individuals of these powerful women that you see today have a lot of work going on. So in our next slide, I'm going to include the links that take you directly to that work that's going on to see where you can access more information of the work that is being done at the historic Hampton House, and then again of telling of the stories and histories of Miami, where you can access some of those books that have been put together by MJ, as well as to continue to interact with the work that Rhea is putting out, because today you just saw a very small, powerful, impactful piece, but a very small piece. And we need to make sure that we keep giving the time to elevating those other works and portfolios. So again, thank you all. And remember, if you want to find us, look for that Green G, Green Space Miami, the new community art space opened by Green Family Foundation. Thanks you for joining us. And thanks MJ, Rhea, and Miss Jacqui. It was a pleasure.